today we're gonna do recap. So yesterday we touched on Genesis chapter 31 to 34. Let's go. Laban's sons were angry of how successful Jacob got him and claimed that he stole everything from their father. And the Lord warned Jacob to return to his father's land. Jacob saw Leah and Rachel and explained the whole situation to them, basically saying he had a dream that their father was cheating him, and also his father was having attitude to their father was having attitude towards Jacob, right? Every time when when Laban will take certain flocks, like let's say he's saying, I'm gonna take the flocks that have streaks or spotting or whatever, God will bless the opposite flocks which don't have any spotting or speckles or anything like that, right? So Rachel and Leah agreed to leave with Jacob, and they even expressed how their father reduced their rights to those of a foreign servant, right? So foreign women, right? And basically when Jacob paid for Leah and Rachel, Laban like basically blew the money, so he was just blowing his fortune basically, right? So Jacob prepares to leave with his wives and their children, remember the 11 kids, to Canaan, the land of Canaan, right? And as they're leaving, Rachel went into her father's house and stole the idols, the false gods, you know what I mean? So Genesis chapter 31 22 to 42. So after they left, Laban hears of it and he leaves with his relatives 3 days later and catches up with Jacob 7 days later, right? So in a dream, the Lord warned Laban to stay away from Jacob, right? So he didn't harm him, but he confronted him and asked him why he deceived him like that, took away his daughters without a proper farewell, right? So then Jacob expressed to Laban that he thought that Laban would take his daughters back from him after his hard work and labor, you know what I mean? So Laban also said somebody stole his idols, and afterwards he went to check into all the tents. You know, he checked the 2 servants first, then he checked Leah's tent, then he checked Rachel. But then Rachel said, because Rachel hid the false idols in the saddle of the camel, and she said, Father, forgive me for not getting up because I'm on my menstrual cycle. I'm just gonna say that. So yeah, so after when Laban couldn't find anything because obviously Rachel hid it, Jacob became very angry, challenged Laban and asked him why he would go and run through the tents and stuff like that and treat him like he's a criminal. Jacob also was complaining about he worked for him as in Laban for 20 years. So he even said any flocks that were stolen, he took the loss, right? Any flocks that were attacked, he also took the loss, right? He worked for Laban in the cold nights, and he worked for Laban in the scorching heat. You know what I mean? So he said, luckily, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, did not let him go empty-handed. Okay? So Genesis chapter 31, 43 to 55. So then, after all that, Laban proposed to make a covenant with Jacob. So Jacob, Laban, and their relatives sat to eat a covenant meal and to commemorate the covenant. And Laban called the place Jagar Sahadutha, which means witness pile in Aramaic, right? And then Jacob names the place Galid, which means the same thing, witness pile in Hebrew. Okay, the pile of stones is a witness of the covenant made between Jacob and Laban. Okay, so the covenant pile of stones was also called Mizpah, which is watchtower. The tower is for the Lord to keep watch between them and to be a witness if Jacob mistreats his wives Leah and Rachel and marry any other wife. Okay, so then Laban declared that declared that him and Jacob shouldn't pass the stones, which is like a boundary, right? To go after each other, like basically harm each other, right? And they swore to the God of Abraham, right? So then, after the oath, Isaac made a tithe to God in the mountain to honor the oath. So then afterwards, after all their feasts and their oath that took place, Laban says his farewell and his goodbyes to his grandchildren and kisses his daughters. Okay. So Genesis chapter 32, verse 1 to 21. So, and this is how, this is going to be the part about Esau, right? So Jacob sends his messengers to Esau, and the messengers told Esau that he owns cattle, donkeys, flocks of sheep, and goats with many servants, both men and women, right? So then Jacob's messengers comes back from the trip and then tells Jacob that Esau is on his way with an army of 400 men, okay? So out of fear, Jacob divided his household with flocks, herds, and camels into two groups. And said, if Esau were to attack the first group and they die, then the other group can escape. Okay? So then, through trembling fear, Jacob goes to God complaining about the promise that God made him and also asking God for protection from Esau, right? Okay. So then, Jacob, after the prayer and the complaint, Jacob selected gifts to present to Esau. And the gifts were 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 female camels with their young ones, right? 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 male donkeys, okay? So then, Jacob gives instructions to his herdsmen, and he said that if Esau comes and he's like, who are these flocks of animals for, then they should tell Esau that these belong to Jacob, but they're a gift to Esau. Okay. All right. So Genesis chapter 32, 22 to 32. That's kind of confusing. 32. All right. Let me get back. My bad. After Jacob crossed the Jabbok River with his 11 sons. Oh, by the way, no, let's continue. Sorry. So after Jacob crossed the Jabbok River with his wives and 11 sons and all his possessions, Jacob wrestled with a man till the break of dawn, right? Then the man ends up breaking Jacob's hip. Then after the fight, Jacob demanded for the man to bless him, right? That man appears to be God, okay? So then God changes Jacob's name to Israel, and then Jacob names the place Peniel, which means face of God. By the way, Israel means wrestled with God, okay? So then the people of Israel, okay, so this is a fun fact. People of Israel don't eat the tendon near the hip sockets because of what happened to Jacob's hip. And remember, as I said, that's just a traditional thing. That doesn't mean that we have to do that. It's just something that they're doing to honor the naming of Jacob to Israel, okay? So then Genesis chapter 33, 1 to 20. Esau came to Jacob with his 400 men. Then Jacob approached his brother and bowed 7 times, okay? So then Esau ran to his brother, kissed and hugged him, and they both wept. They were both crying. Then Esau was like, who are these lovely people, right? So then Jacob introduced his family, the servants, his children, all that to Esau, right? And then Jacob offered his gifts to Esau, but Esau told Jacob, hey man, I got wealth, I got flocks, I got all these wonderful things, right? But then Jacob kept insisting, and then Esau just accepted the gifts. So then Esau, the funny thing, Esau invites Jacob to Seir, but then Esau heads back home. Instead of going to Seir, Jacob then travels to Succoth, which means shelters, right? And then built a home and tents for his livestock. Jacob arrives at a town called Shechem in Canaan and bought a land from the family of Hamor, which is the father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of silver. He then builds an altar and names it El Elohi Israel. All right. Genesis chapter 34, verse 1 to 31. Then, the controversy, right? Dinah got raped by the prince Shechem, and then afterwards he fell in love with her, saying tender words to her and stuff like that. Then Jacob heard about the matter. Then Shechem Hamor came to Jacob and their brothers to discuss the matter with Jacob. When Simeon and Levi heard what happened, they were furious. So Hamor the king, who was a Hivite, spoke to them and said, Shechem is in love with Dinah, and they should arrange marriages together. Their daughters marry their sons, and vice versa, right? So then Shechem begged Jacob and their brothers to marry Dinah if he can marry Dinah, no matter what the dowry is or no matter what gifts they demand, right? So unfortunately, the brothers deceitfully told Shechem and Hamor, it can only be possible if every male in your town are to be circumcised, right? So then Hamor and his son Shechem agreed, and in no time all the males in that town got circumcised, right? Okay. So even Shechem spoke to the townsmen and told them that Jacob and his relatives are their friends and they are welcome in their land. And if they do this request, which is the circumcision and allowing them to be in their town, then they can eventually own Jacob's possessions because he's a very wealthy man. It's like one of those things where you got a president and then there's Elon Musk, the richest man. Like, you know, it's like one of those things where the guy is super rich, so they want to inherit his possessions. Okay, let me continue. So 3 days later, while the wounds of the male in the town were still sore, Simeon and Levi went into the town and slaughtered all the men, including Hamor, who was the king of the town, and Shechem. Then they got Dinah and returned her back home. So the whole time Dinah was with them, Hamor and Shechem, right? Then the rest of Jacob's sons, you know, so that would probably be like 9 of the sons, just looted the whole town, stole the possessions, and captured the women and the little children of the town. Then afterwards, Jacob was furious, and he said to Levi and Simeon and his sons, right, that they have ruined him, and how the Perizzites and the Canaanites will join forces and crush them. But then Simeon and Levi said angrily, why should Shechem treat their sister as a prostitute? And that wraps up Genesis chapter 31 to 34. Okay, so that is the recap of those chapters.